Today, we're talking about indie games that might dominate conversations in 2026. And yes, I said might because indie hype is like climbing a mountain in flip-flops. Sometimes you reach the top, sometimes you fall immediately. Some of these games look incredible, some are risky, and some might even miss the release window completely. But that is part of the fun. Let's take a relaxed walk through the indie future, with a mix of excitement, skepticism, and mild emotional damage. Cairn opens the year with a very bold idea, a climbing game that actually respects climbing. You play as Ava, an expert mountaineer trying to be the first to reach the summit of Mount Kami. Very quickly, the game makes it clear that this is not a power fantasy. Every move matters. Every handhold matters. Every mistake hurts. Unlike games like Chusant or Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy, Cairn aims for realism. You need to manage stamina, food, pythons, and your physical condition. If you push too hard, you pay for it. If you plan badly, you pay for it. As a developer, this kind of design is terrifying and exciting at the same time, because realism means friction, and friction scares players. But it also creates strong identity. The game makers are known for Fury and Haven. Both games had very strong artistic direction and tight mechanics. Fury especially showed how confident they are with difficulty and player mastery. This suggests Cairn will be polished and intentional rather than bloated. The big question is whether players will embrace slow, careful climbing in a world full of fast dopamine games. If it works, people will talk about it a lot. If it doesn't, it will still be fascinating to analyze. Mugenics is one of those games that feels like it has been coming for 1,000 years. It is the new project by Edmund Macmillan, the creator of Super Meat Boy and The Binding of Isaac. Those two games alone shaped modern indie design, especially in terms of difficulty, repetition, and dark humor. According to interviews and previews published over the years, Mugenics has gone through multiple reworks, which is usually a red flag, but also very on-brand for Macmillan. Mugenics is a roguelike where you manage a colony of cats. You feed them, you make them reproduce, and you send them into turn-based battles and exploration. Death resets the run, but progression carries over in various ways. The tone is strange, uncomfortable, funny, and sometimes gross, which again is very on-brand. This game is interesting because it mixes long-term management with short-term roguelike runs. That balance is extremely hard to get right. Too much persistence and the game loses tension. Too little and players feel punished. If Macmillan nails it, Mugenics could be one of those games that indie developers study for years. If not, it will still be talked about, probably loudly. Slay the Spire 2 has the easiest job and the hardest job at the same time. The first game, released in 2019 by Megacrit, became one of the most influential deck builders ever made. Its success is well documented, with millions of copies sold across PC and consoles, according to public statements from the developers and publishers. The core loop remains similar. You climb a tower, fight enemies using a deck of cards, and adapt to procedural challenges. What makes the sequel scary is expectations. Slay the Spire players are very knowledgeable. They understand balance, synergies, and meta progression deeply. Any change will be noticed immediately. Slay the Spire is a masterclass in system-driven design. Simple visuals, extremely deep mechanics. This is a reminder that clarity beats complexity. If Slay the Spire 2 introduces meaningful new systems without overcomplicating the experience, it will dominate discussions in 2026. If it feels too safe, people will still play it, but maybe talk about it less. Okay, I'll put it here, because around mid-year or maybe more on the second half of it, there is usually at least one indie game that explodes thanks to festivals like Steam Next Fest or events like Day of the Devs. This section is reserved for that game, It might be something we have never heard of yet, made by a tiny team using Unity, Unreal, or Godot, with a single mechanic executed perfectly. Historically, games like this often focus on one strong idea rather than scope. Think about games that build their entire identity around time manipulation, physics, or a very specific narrative structure. If you want to add a real example here later, look at Steam Festival winners or games with extremely high wishlists growth in 2025. Bradley the Badger is developed by Day 4 Night, a studio led by Davide Soliani, known for the Mario plus Rabbids series at Ubisoft. This is interesting because it shows a creator moving from a big publisher environment into a more independent space. That transition often leads to very personal games. Bradley is a badger who is already the protagonist of a fictional video game series, and he wakes up in a world he does not recognize. The game plays with meta ideas about sequels, franchises, and player expectations. This kind of narrative is risky because it relies on the player understanding video game language, but it can be very powerful if done well. This game will likely have high polish, strong animation, and clean controls, given the team's background. The challenge will be balancing accessibility with depth. If Bradley the Badger lands emotionally, people will absolutely be talking about it in 2026. Vampire Crawlers is a spin-off of Vampire Survivors, developed by Luca Galante and his studio. Vampire Survivors launched in 2022 and became a massive success, confirmed by sales milestones shared publicly by the studio and covered by outlets like Eurogamer and GamesIndustry.biz. The original game was simple, chaotic, and incredibly addictive. Vampire Crawlers takes the same universe and aesthetics but shifts genre completely. This time, it is a dungeon exploration game with turn-based combat built around the card deck. This is a very smart move, because it avoids competing directly with the original game while still using its identity. This shows confidence. They are not afraid to experiment. Releasing on all platforms at launch also suggests strong production support. If Vampire Crawlers keeps the charm of the original while offering meaningful strategic depth, it will be discussed a lot. Not every hyped indie game will be amazing. Some will be misunderstood. Some will simply not match the fantasy players built in their heads. Game development is very fragile sometimes. One system change can ripple through the entire project. What matters is that these games push ideas forward. Even a flawed indie game can influence design trends, tools, and workflows. Many successful mechanics started as imperfect experiments. Let me know what you think in the comments, especially if there is an indie game you are already watching closely. And as always, thanks for watching!